I'm anticipating submitting a federal grant to bring in some much needed reading interventions and test what has shown itself to be an effective model for helping kids make significant gains in reading. So what I'm going to do here is give an overview of what that model looks like, the reading intervention model, talk about the logistics of how it may be implemented in our area, and then make a special request for some feedback, some ideas from the districts to make sure that if we're funded, it can be rolled out appropriately within your districts. So let's take a look at the model first. It's called the SCRA model. It's the 6 components reading approach. And we've implemented this in the past, but now we have a chance to implement it broadly across our region and then study its effect to see how exactly it is contributing and to what degree it's contributing to students' reading achievement. So first, a little about the model. The logistical piece, what the structure looks like. So it's fundamentally an after-school reading intervention model. Kids sign up for this tutoring, and they receive 2 hours of tutoring per week within a small group setting. 3 or 4 students only, certainly never more than 4, because as it turns out, most of the effective strategies for reading require that small group involvement. Per student, it's 1 semester's worth of intervention. So a group of students get tutoring 1 semester, and then the following semester they can receive tutoring again. A different group receives tutoring. It also includes training for the teachers who are involved in this. They're trained in the SCRA model and the effective strategies. They're trained in identifying next steps for learning for students. During the tutoring period, throughout the semester, they receive monitoring from a site coordinator who's going to be looking at their instructional reports. What are they teaching? What components are they addressing? Things like that. And as needed, receive follow-up coaching. All of the students do have pre and post testing, so we can find out what they've actually learned. We use the iReady assessment to do that, and then of course any differences from pre to post test would indicate the degree of gain. So that's sort of the logistical structure of the model. Now for the instructional piece, what happens for the kids? As I noted, this is the 6 components reading approach. So each teacher, each week, will be providing instruction in each of the 6 components. They will be trained and supported in using high effect strategies, basically those strategies identified in the What Works Clearinghouse as having the largest effect size on those various components of reading. The focus is not on grade level achievement, 4th grade student, let's teach some 4th grade skills. Instead, it's on next steps instruction, or Vygotsky zones of proximal development, which actually turns out to be far more appropriate for the kids that get served. If we've got a student who is in the 4th grade, reading 2 grade levels behind, we don't want to teach them 4th grade skills. We want to teach them 2nd grade, and then we want to advance from there towards grade level skills, just to make sure they always have the foundation necessary to continue the advancement. The instructional strategies are integrated with SEL components. It's a part of the nature of the activities themselves, the collaborative nature of the activities, so we don't really stop and talk about SEL topics. Instead, they are employed within the instructional strategies themselves. Now, one thing that's very interesting about this model, and one thing that makes it very unique and worth studying, is that it doesn't include some of those normal things you would find in a reading program. It doesn't have a curriculum. It doesn't have required text. It doesn't have required activities. Instead, the focus is on helping teachers determine what students need next. Focus on the kids as opposed to focus on the requirements of a program or requirements of a curriculum. We've seen it work powerfully, not only in this region, but across 4 states where this has been implemented in the past. But it's one of those things that's very unique to this model and makes it worth studying carefully. We've spent an awful lot of money an awful lot of time talking about this curriculum and that curriculum and this program and that reading program and so forth. But instead, we take all of that out and we have the teachers, we train and coach the teachers to focus on the individual needs within their small group instruction. Now, along the way, of course, we're going to be providing instructional guidance, we're providing resources, we're providing coaching, and things that teachers can use as they are designing, as they're implementing strategies and designing appropriate activities for the students in their reading groups. So it's a very different model, but I'm going to take a look at the data here from the prior implementation. And the data are very compelling that this model has a pretty high degree of success, as you'll see. So a few other logistics. For districts that participate, they will sign an MOU. So for such things like make space available, help promote it to the student body, help solicit for teachers to be involved in this. Those types of things help to make sure that the fidelity of the program is being enforced. The teachers would serve as contractors, so after school and out of their duty time, and they would contract directly with the REC for this service. The students are brought into the program through parental sign-up. We're looking at grades 1 through 5, so obviously kids can't sign up for themselves. They may be recommended by their teachers or by other school staff, but ultimately we have to have parental consent for students to participate. Not only, but for two reasons. Not only for just the after-school activity and being involved in this reading intervention, but also consent to be a part of the study of the reading intervention. So we implemented this in the past. It's a very different model than what we often find, but we've done it before. This program was implemented from spring 2015 through spring 2019. And in total, we had 18,400 students involved in this approach. Within grades 1 through 5 alone, 14,600 students participated. And we have the data for all those kids to give us an idea of whether or not it works, basically, and to what degree. Locally, this program has already been implemented in Bloomfield, CCSD, and Farmington through that prior implementation. Happily, enough time has gone by that students who may have been involved previously would not be available to be involved again. So we can have a clean data set that we need for the research aspects of it. But we had 1,100 students in our region already participate just in those target grades. And we'll be looking at their data next. So one of the things that is unique about this model is the fact that it addresses 6 components of reading instruction. So we hear a lot about science of reading and letters and so forth. But all of this science of reading is really coming out of the findings of the National Reading Panel. Letters comes from that research pool. Science of reading comes from that, and this program also draws exactly from the same set of research. So having this program, this intervention within a school setting is going to contribute to teachers who are learning to implement letters. It's going to contribute to the deployment of the science of reading because it's all coming from the same place. So the one big difference, though, science of reading and letters both focus on 5 components of reading, but here we've got 6. Number 6 is oral language development, which is all of that information about how language is being used within a context, how language is used appropriately. It contributes to vocabulary development, it contributes to fluency, and essentially, it contributes to understanding and interpreting text, which is comprehension. So what happens when we implement all 6 reading components every week? So in 2015, I took a look at every tutor's instructional report. and I mapped that to the 6 components of reading. Are they in fact implementing all 6? And I mapped that to student gains and how much time students have been in the program. So the pink line that you see there, that is the growth for kids from 24 hours, 27 hours, and all the way up to the maximum of 32 hours for teachers who did not address all 6 components every week. The blue line at the top, same number of hours, everything the same, except the teachers did address all 6 components every week. So what we see is at the 24 to 26 hour range, kids are making it about a 0.88, the next range of 1.03 grade level gain, and at the maximum 30 to 32 hours, we see that kids, on average, were making a 1.37 grade level gain. Now we're only talking about 1 semester, so that is a very strong indicator that addressing all 6 components significantly increases students' reading ability. So by the comparison for the non-6 group, we see a 0.68, which is still a very strong result. 0.68 grade level growth in a semester is a good result, but 1.37 is better. And for that reason, we require the teachers to address all 6 components every week. The difference in results shows that that is an effective approach. So that's what we do. Now, what did we get? All right, so this is for all the kids, that 18,000 kids and all the grades that were involved. The blue lines are representing the pre-test reading levels, and the red lines are the post-test reading levels. And obviously you see a gain all the way through. When we do the math, this is the actual gain that's represented. So for our target group for this grant, 1st through 5th grade, we're seeing from a 0.9 grade level gain in a semester all the way up to a 1.1 grade level gain per semester. Now, we can look also at the percentage of students on grade level. Again, blue is pre-test and red is post-test. And we can think, well, hey, how come we don't have 100% on grade level, right? So, for example, in the 4th grade, we started with 3% on grade level. We ended with 41. But remember, we're not teaching grade level skills. We're helping students to develop their foundations that will eventually get them there. And the fact of the matter is, for a lot of kids, grade level proficiency is too much of a jump to accomplish within a 1 semester time. So if we've got students 2 grade levels behind in 4th grade, we're probably not going to see 2 grade level growth in a single semester. But we still managed to get 41% of the kids 2 grade level, which is a phenomenal result. Now, one of the things that we can do looking at the results is we can estimate approximately how much growth the students were making already on an annual basis. We can look at pre-test results, fall pre-test for 1 grade level, compare it to fall pre-test for another grade level, and it'll give us an estimate of how much natural growth kids are making from their classroom and other interventions. Then we can compare that to the total growth students made during this time period. And the difference between the estimated natural growth and the achieved growth can be attributed to this tutoring model, this intervention model. So what we see here is in the light blue or the teal at the bottom, that's the anticipated growth for students at a grade level. The red represents the difference between natural growth and actual achieved growth during this time period. The pink then represents how much can be attributed to this intervention model. And what we see at every single grade level is that this 2 hours a week with next step learning, effective strategies, all 6 components, has a stronger effect on students' reading growth than what was happening in the classroom. And the two together then equal the total growth that we saw demonstrated during that one semester period. What does it mean? It means that this is fulfilling something essential for students that for whatever reason, they're not getting at the classroom level. And the result is a very strong gain by these kids. So one of the things that we also looked at is what effect does it have on the teacher? We have a lot of data that says great for kids. But we were hearing from a lot of teachers about being reinvigorated, about being inspired, about loving tutoring and getting back to why they got into teaching in the first place and all those wonderful things, which are very positive to hear. But we also heard them self-reporting, I feel like I am a better teacher because I've been involved in this. So I went and asked them. I surveyed all the teachers serving as tutors on 3 major questions. Do you feel like you have a better understanding of reading skills? Do you feel like you are better able to implement effective reading instruction? And overall, do you feel like you're a better teacher? And the results were overwhelmingly yes for all 3 of those. So we knew something was happening there, but we needed an independent measure. So I looked at 3rd grade reading skills, 3rd grade reading scores for tutors, and I compared it against 3rd grade reading skills for kids of non-tutors. So we looked at 4 districts, small district, 2 medium district, and a large district. And limiting our data set to 3rd grade, because that's kind of the benchmark year there, we looked at the state assessment scores, the ELA scores for students in tutors' classrooms compared to students in non-tutors' classrooms. Now, from that data set, we removed all of the students who had received tutoring. I didn't want to know about classrooms plus tutoring. I want to know about what's happening in just the classrooms. So we took those kids out. Then we compared the 2 groups. Non-tutored kids in a tutor's classroom, non-tutored kids in a non-tutor's classroom. What were their average state assessment scores? And as it turns out, in each case, the students in the tutor's classrooms outperformed the students in the non-tutor's classrooms. What that means is that the experience, the training, the coaching, the practice in new skills and new strategies was carrying over to the classroom and was measurable by its effect on state assessment scores, which is kind of unique, right? We hear a lot about, oh, this will help kids learn to read better, but ultimately schools, teachers, kids are assessed on the state assessment results. And we're able to specifically tie the experience as a tutor to improvements in state assessment results for kids. So we see that their small district, 2.57 grade level average ELA score compared to a 1.92, 339 to 273, and so forth. What does it mean? It means that we know that the effect of tutoring is very positive for kids. We know it significantly increases their reading skills. We also know, based on this, that the skill is transferring over, and this experience serves as an effective professional development model for teachers. It wasn't designed to do that, but it turns out that was also happening. So that's the model. That's SCRA. That's why we want to implement it. That's the effect we have seen in the past. But now the time is really to implement it regionally under controlled circumstances with a high degree of fidelity, and then actually test it so it can prove itself. What it would look like. So the grant would go in early to midsummer. The grants are due. If funded, the project would start January 2025. Then there's going to be a period of getting MOUs with districts, identifying schools, starting to solicit for student participation, starting to find the teachers and to get them trained and so forth, with the beginning of services then in fall of 2025. So what we're looking for 4 districts to participate. That's the preference, but ultimately what we're looking for is 20 schools. Now, with the number of teachers and the number of funding and so forth, overall, during the course of this 5-year project, we would be able to directly serve about 1,900 students. And we would do it in 2 cohorts. So we need 20 schools. Cohort 1 would be 10 of those schools for a couple of years. Cohort 2 would be an additional 10, a new 10 schools for the next 2 years. So we do this for a couple reasons. One reason is simply financial. There's not enough money in an annual budget to support all 20 schools at the same time. So in order to make this available to as many schools as possible and as many kids as possible, we would do it in 2 cohorts, 10 and then 10. But the other reason is more on the research purpose. Here's what I would expect to happen. We have some teachers who are implementing this model, and they're excited about it. They're sharing it with their colleagues. They're seeing some good results from the kids and so forth. Other teachers, what are you doing, right? So they share what they're doing. And what happens then is the intervention, the training, all of this begins to bleed out to the other teachers, which makes it very difficult then to have 2 separate groups that we can compare, right? So by limiting it to just a couple of years, we can mitigate some of that bleed and keep the student data as clean as possible, so we can actually compare kids who are involved in the program with kids who are not involved, and teachers who are involved and teachers who are not involved. So there's a couple of different reasons. But ultimately, so then 10 schools per cohort, 70 teachers per cohort. Then those 70 teachers get divided into 2 groups, because we have to have a group that is implementing the model, and we have to have a group that is not implementing the model so we can compare them together. That will be done through a randomization process by the project evaluators. They will say, here's our 70 teachers, and they will randomly assign teachers to either receive all the program and all of the components of it, or to do business as usual. Because that's the 2 groups. We've got our SCRA group, and we have our business as usual group. Business as usual group basically means whatever program the district already has in place, whatever intervention the teachers do, whatever is already happening or could be happening in an after-school tutoring environment. The SCRA group, the treatment group, they're the ones who get the training, they get the coaching, they get the analysis of their instructional plans, all the record keeping and all that. Both groups, students in both groups will take the pre and post test, so we have the data for comparison. They'll all take the iReady at the beginning, they'll all take it at the end. And we'll also look at state assessment results for both groups as well, to look to see if there are differences there. The nice thing about this is that both of those groups can be paid out of this grant. Because the fact is, we've got to have a control group and we've got to have a treatment group for comparison. So in order to ensure that we've got sufficient numbers of both, we will pay them all, which is pretty neat. One interesting thing from just a financial standpoint, this grant does not have a non-supplant requirement, which means if the district is already paying for some after-school programming, for the teachers involved in this project, we can pick up those costs, saving the district some money to put somewhere else. One question I would anticipate is what happens at a school when their cohort is over? So you've got that cohort 1, they're providing services for a couple of years, and then we go to a different 10 schools. Well, what happens to that first school? The bottom line is they can do whatever they want, right? We're not going to be looking at their data anymore. If it turns out that the school wants to continue with this model, at the REC, we will help to do that. We can't provide any funding, not through the grant, to help them do that. But certainly we can help them get it established and implemented more broadly across their school. So even if their funding period is over, at the end of their cohort, they're certainly welcome and encouraged to continue it on their own. Now, so we talked about randomization of the teachers, but the students also need to be randomized. We need to avoid the possibility that teachers or school personnel will say, hey, we want these kids to work with those teachers. We want this kid to work with that teacher, this kid to work with that teacher. And it pollutes the research aspects. It pollutes the data here because there's some non-randomized assignment taking place. So the students also have to be randomized. So we've got our random set of teachers over here, and they will be assigned a random group of students with just a few caveats. First and foremost, teachers will not be tutoring kids they have in their classrooms. We don't want this to be a continuation of the classroom. We want to be able to sort of get rid of any relationship baggage that may be occurring. We want a nice, clean implementation. So, new teacher with a new kid. The other caveat has to do with the composition of the group. We're not going to have second grade with the fifth grade, for example. Now, we could do second and third together or fourth and fifth together. That's not a problem. And actually, it's one of the things we did previously, and it turned out to be just fine. But we're not going to see students assigned to a group if there's more than one grade level difference between them. So there are some restrictions on that, but ultimately, kids are randomly assigned to tutors, both in the 6 components group and in the control group. Then there will be some data collection for both populations, obviously the pre-post test. Also for both populations, we're going to look at their state assessment results, both the kids that are in the tutoring and the kids that are in the tutor's classroom, similar to what we did before. Then the control group, that's actually for the SCRA group, will do the ongoing analysis of their instructional plans. What are they teaching? What components are they addressing? And what strategies are they using? There will also be some focus group sessions of those teachers about their experience, what they have seen, what worked, what didn't work, what effect they may have seen on themselves, and sort of their subjective opinion on what effect it had on the students. So there's some data collection because ultimately it's a research grant. Now, to get more information about this project, you can always go to our website. I've got a page on there which sort of lays out a lot of these graphs that we saw here, the data, why we want to go about it, and so forth. So here's what the ask is at this point. I think this has a very high degree of potential for helping kids in our region improve their reading scores. And we know the scores are not great, right? And that some additional intervention may be useful to them in order to help them make good progress in their reading skills and ultimately reach grade level proficiency. So the ask is first and foremost, which districts may be interested in participating in this project? Like I said, I'm looking for 4, which would give us a nice distribution across geography, across community types, across populations, and so forth. So we can really look at some interesting factors that may contribute to the success of the program. But ultimately, what we're looking for is 20 schools. So whether that's 3 districts or 4 districts, we need 20 schools so we can implement the cohort model. The other ask is if your district may be interested in participating in this, I'm looking for some feedback on the design. What challenges do you see? How do you see this fitting into what you're already doing? Because if we get funded for this, I want to make sure that it's going to be implemented in a way that is appropriate for your district and appropriate for the communities that you serve. So feedback. So who's interested? And what information can you provide that we can then include in the implementation plan to make sure that when and if it's funded, it will be implemented successfully in your region. So that's the 6 components reading approach. That's where we're at. I hope to hear from you. I hope to get some valuable feedback from you so that we can implement successfully in your region. If you've got any questions, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I look forward to speaking with you. Thanks much.